Hey friends, I am Jason, and let's talk about getting home. There's probably an endless number of reasons out there why you might have to get home on foot. And I guess we don't really need to spend a whole lot of time talking about what all those reasons are. We just need to get into how you would do it if you had to walk home. Having some sort of game plan is probably going to be the biggest thing that we need to consider. How far are you from home? What kind of resources, what kind of food and water and supplies and equipment, what kind of stuff are you going to need to make something like that happen? Now, you might be 4 miles from home, and that's just where you work, and your get home situation is a 4-mile walk. And really, you don't need anything. I could walk 4 miles literally barefoot with no water and be fine. So you don't really need any equipment whatsoever if that's your walk home. Now, if your 4-mile walk is through a war zone, that might be a little bit different. A realistic scenario is that you're out venturing down some back country road somewhere, car breaks down and there's nobody around, and you've got to find your way home. You got to walk your way home, and it might be 10, 20 plus miles, something like that, back to a civilization where you can get some help and get your vehicle towed out of there. Or maybe it's that worst case scenario where you're in the city somewhere and the EMP strikes, and now suddenly you are in a lot of trouble and you're 100 miles from home, and we've got to walk 100 miles potentially. The logistics alone in that are extremely complicated, and there's a lot of things that a lot of variables that need to be considered, and not everything can be predicted. So we've got to be nimble, we've got to be light on our feet, we've got to be quick thinkers, and we've got to be able to adapt to the situation and change the plan. Maybe we have a plan. So for example, I live 100 miles or so from a big city. If I was to venture into that big city and the EMP would strike, how the heck would I get home? The logistics of that alone are extremely complicated. And that is why we need to have some planning. We need to have a route picked out, multiple routes, alternative routes to the alternative routes, so we can potentially walk our way home. Are you by yourself? Do you have your family with you? All of these things are very overwhelming when you start to think about all the little details that could go along with it. What kind of physical shape are you in? Can you even do something like that? Is it possible, even in the best of times, to walk 100 miles? I think in a worst case scenario like that EMP in an urban area, I think you've got a short window of time where people haven't completely lost their minds and they're not going full cannibal yet. We're not full Mad Max. And in that short window of time, I think that you should probably get the heck out of Dodge as quickly as possible. I think that's going to be to your advantage to get away from those large numbers of people, because that's where that chaos is going to be. Those urban areas are going to be where people are losing their minds, freaking out because they're scared, and or they're just taking advantage of a situation where, law enforcement isn't there to enforce the rules of the land. So we need to get out of there as quickly as possible. And like I was saying before, what kind of physical shape are you in? Are you able to cover 20 miles in a day? 20 miles, if you could walk 20 miles, that'll get you outside of most of the real urban. If you're in the center of an urban area, 20 miles will get you most places, will get you outside of that and at least into suburbia where it's not going to be as crazy. Regardless of the physical fitness, the physical shape that you're in my opinion, traveling light is going to be the way to go. You're going to suffer one of two ways. Well, you could suffer a lot of ways, I guess, but primarily you're going to suffer one of two ways. You're going to suffer on the way, or you're going to suffer when you get there. So let's say it is a long trek to get yourself home. You are going to be needing to spend the night out, and perhaps that's going to be in a wooded area like this. Perhaps it's just the bushes on the side of the sidewalk somewhere that you just tucked into. I don't know. I don't know what your situation is. I don't know exactly where you're going to be. But if it was my walk home, this is probably what it would be like a lot of the way. I would be following the roads because that's going to be the fastest, easiest way for me to travel, unless the world got full Mad Max. If we were full Mad Max, I would probably stay off the road just like this right here, because right here, no one can see me. If I stop moving, there's no possible way a car like that would see me, or someone even walking by. Even if they were looking for me, if I stood just behind a tree like this right here, I stood behind this tree and I just remain motionless, and I'm wearing at least some sort of earth tony color would be ideal, but if not, just standing behind something like this and having some layers of vegetation, at least 2 layers of vegetation between you and whatever it is that's looking for you, is going to conceal your body. So handrailing a road like this is going to be the way to go, in my opinion. It's going to be the easiest way to stay concealed and stay hidden from people if people are acting inappropriately. But that's what I would do if the world was crazy. If it wasn't quite crazy yet and you're on backcountry roads and in rural areas, just hit the back roads and just cover as many miles as you possibly can. Hopefully you're wearing good footwear. That's a big one. If there's one thing that's going to stop you, it's going to be your feet. So these are comfortable shoes, regardless of what some people might say. And people, you guys might be like, you should never wear those. Those are inappropriate footwear. Sure, whatever. I ran 8 miles in these the other day just because I could. So they work good for that. But in my truck, in my vehicle, I have a pair of basically running shoes. And I have spare socks. I have spare socks in my pack as well. So if I was going to make this trip, I would not wear these. If I broke down, I would probably not wear these. I would put on those wool socks, and I would put on those running shoes, and I would beat feet, because that would be the best footwear for the job. This is just what I happen to be wearing today. So footwear, changing your socks, having at least one change of socks is going to be crucial, because if you start to get hot spots, you start to get blisters, you are going to be suffering. So in my pack, like I said before, less is more, in my opinion. The less crap that you're carrying on your back, the less problems that you're going to have with your feet, the less problems you're going to have with your aching shoulders and your low back. All those problems will be much, much less because you're carrying less. This pack probably weighs maybe 12 pounds, something like that. And I would feel very confident covering 20, even 40 miles, maybe even more. The only reason I say it's limited is because I don't have a lot of food in here. I've got some salted seeds right here. Salted pumpkin seeds, just what I had in my truck, and that's what I would grab. I would have what I had in my vehicle. If I wasn't, ready, prepared to walk the distance, I would just grab what I had in my vehicle. But salted foods are really, really good, because as you're moving, you're going to be burning through electrolytes, salt and potassium, and if you can't replace that stuff, your muscles might start to cramp up, and you're going to be in a bad spot. But anyway, back on feet. Footwear. Good comfortable shoes, broke-in boots, hiking boots, walking shoes, whatever, and then at least one change of socks. And I highly recommend merino wool socks, because one, they don't stink after wearing them for multiple days in a row. They dry really, really fast, and they just wick the moisture away from your feet, and it's going to be the way to go. It's going to save your feet. You're not going to get those hot spots and blisters that will basically end your day and end your walk home. I also carry sleeping clothes. So if I was in the swamp, the Georgia jungle that we're in right now, sweating just sitting here talking to you, I'm doing nothing, and I'm sweating because of the high humidity. What I want, if I do have to bed down at night, is a nice dry change of clothes. This is basically long johns, merino wool tops and bottoms that I can sleep in, and it's so much more comfortable, and you get a better night's sleep if you have that. So I've got top and bottoms, and I got spare socks in this waxed bag here that's going to keep my stuff pretty much watertight. It's going to keep it dry. So there's my spare clothes. If it was wintertime, yeah, you'd have to have more layers and some rain gear perhaps. Let's say I have covered a long ways. I've been walking all day long, and I am just exhausted, and I haven't quite made it home. Maybe it's, a 2-day walk or something like that to get home, and I've just got to bed down for the night just to get a couple minutes of rest. Walked all day long. What would I do? Well, I would take my very minimal shelter that I have in here, and I would find a nice secluded spot close to the road right here, and I would nestle in for the evening. This is a pretty good spot right here, without searching very, very much, and without, spending a lot of time trying to find the perfect camp spot. I would probably bed down right here. Why would I pick this spot? It's because it is hidden from the road. If I laid down right here, there's absolutely no way somebody would see me from the road. Even if they were walking right there in the wood line looking for me, there's no way they would see me. And I'll show you that. I'll demonstrate that here in just a second. But this is where I would lay down, and I would look up and I would check for widowmakers, right? I'd make sure I wasn't on some sort of game trail. I'd make sure I wasn't laying in an anthill. All of the normal stuff, you know, with the exception of trying to find fuel for a fire. I wouldn't have a fire in this situation unless, of course, I was dying of hypothermia. But this is pretty much it. My bed is made. There's not a whole lot that I would need to do to this spot right here. It's kind of a little bit concaved right there for my body. I've got a little bit of a headrest right there, the little natural pillow. And it doesn't take much. Honestly, I've slept outside a lot. And if you haven't slept outside a lot, you might have difficulty sleeping outside. But I sleep excellent when I'm in the woods. So I can sleep pretty much anywhere, and I don't need a whole lot of shelter accommodations, if you will, to make me happy. So what I would do is I would reach in here and I'd pull out my bivy bag. I really like these. They're extremely lightweight, the SOL Escape bivvies, and they're quite waterproof. Not 100%. I mean, if you're laying in a puddle in a torrential downpour, eventually you'll probably get wet through this. I haven't slept in a puddle in this, so I don't know for sure, but I assume that eventually you'll get wet. But if it's a light drizzle, a little bit of rain, you can curl up in this and without anything over top of you, and you're probably going to be fine for an evening. If you needed a little additional shelter, I always carry a poncho with me. I travel everywhere with a poncho. I don't go anywhere pretty much without this poncho. Very few exceptions of that, because this is my rain gear. I can drape it over me and over top of my pack to keep the contents of my pack dry. And I could set this up like a shelter. So all I would do if I needed to sleep for the night, I could do one of two things. I could just put my poncho on. Let's say it is raining. It's downpour right now. It's currently raining. Just put my poncho on, sit down on the hillside here, drape it over my knees and my legs, and then I'm good for the evening. And maybe I'm leaning up against a tree, and maybe I use my pack for my pillow, and maybe this is how I spend the night, just like this. And there's absolutely nobody that's gonna know that I'm here. I mean, the road's right there, and there's no way, because of the spot that I've chosen. Your site location is important, just like normal camping, but even more so in this situation, because perhaps, you know, you're on, you know, park property, or you're on somebody's private land. You know, you're not trying to steal anything. You're not trying to, you know, break the laws, or you don't want to trespass. You just got to get yourself home, and you need a moment to rest. So maybe you're on someone's private land, you know, and you've got to stay under the radar for a few minutes, you know, a few hours to catch some Z's, and then you can get back out. But anyway, so maybe this is how I spend the night, right here in my poncho. Or perhaps tent stake made, another tent stake made, what I could do, I could sleep in it just like this, pretty much. Tie off the hood. Usually close up the big hole where your head goes, because that's gonna leak for sure. I give it a couple twists, flop it over on itself, and then tie it off using the cordage that's attached to the actual hood. And this shelter right here, with a little bit of practice, can be set up in about, I'd say, 2 minutes. And after tying my hood off, I could use what's left of the cordage to suspend it up to a branch like this one. I could tie it up to something like this, and that's going to give me a little bit of elevation, very simply. So that gives me a little bit of headroom in there. Yeah, it makes the profile a little bit higher, but for the most part, because I've chosen this really awesome spot right here, I can tuck in here. I can get inside my bivy bag and just lay right on the ground like that. If you had some sort of mattress, like one of the accordion style thermarests or an inflatable sleep pad or something, that would be awesome. That would be perfect. But again, weight and bulk. If you want to carry it, awesome. You should do that. If you don't want to, you can survive without it for a couple nights for sure. So I could crawl inside my bivy here, or I also, well, actually I don't have it in here. Or you could carry some trash bags with you, some 42, 55 gallon drum liners, and you could fill those full of leaves. And that's a really lightweight, improvised sort of mattress that's gonna insulate you from the ground. And in the colder months, that's gonna be really, really important. In the friggin' hot, sweaty summer like it is right now, It's 9 a.m. and it's already so hot. You're not going to be too worried about getting cold from the ground. So that would be my shelter for the night, and I would tuck myself and I would tuck my gear underneath this poncho, and I could stretch completely out and be quite comfortable and protected from the pouring down rain. Whatever is happening outside isn't really going to affect me. And this is honestly, this is how I camp pretty much all the time. If I'm camping solo, this is how I camp. So I'm very, very comfortable with this. I'm very used to this. That's my primary shelter for the most part. And unless I'm sleeping in a hammock. A hammock is cool, but in a situation like this, you want to be low to the ground, because anytime you're elevating yourself, it's going to be more easy to see you. There's the road. Where's my shelter? Right there. There it is. See it? There is no way someone would know that you're there unless you had a big rip-roaring fire and you're, you know, roasting marshmallows or something. No one's gonna know you're there. So you could spend a few hours, get a few hours of sleep, rest your body, eat something, and recover from that big walk that you just did. And then breaking down camp is super easy. Rip that thing out of the ground and just start beating feet again to continue your way home. You don't want to skimp on your shelter, because shelter is going to be really important depending on what the weather conditions are, time of year, that kind of stuff. But you also don't want to carry everything but the kitchen sink. So this is my primary means of shelter where I live. And in my situation, this plan would work for me. Your results may vary. But you need to practice. That's the thing. You need to get out and practice these things, setting up your shelters. See how long it takes you. See what works for you. And then you can make adjustments from there. Carry this stuff on your back. Do a 20-mile hike and see how it actually affects your body. See how you feel after a 20-mile hike with minimal replenishment, if you will. So I could sit down here in my shelter. I could take care of my feet. You know, I could dry out my socks and hang my socks up here to dry out a little bit. Normally I would drape my wet socks on the backside of my backpack, like on these clips. As I walk, I would be changing my socks out regular, because if I'm sweaty, my socks are going to get wet. I would just drape my socks on these compression straps right here and let them dry in the sunshine if it was sunny, obviously. And then I'd be swapping those out regularly. Let's talk about water. Water, you know, water's probably number one on the list. If it's not number one, it's right there. If you don't have a way to collect water on your way, because you can only carry so much water. If your commute home and your walk home is in the Arizona desert, yikes, that could be tough. And you might have to carry a lot of water. And that'll be really tough, because as we all know, water's friggin' heavy. Where I live, I carry an empty water filter like this one right here, this Grail. I don't have to have water in it, because I know every quarter of a mile I'm going to be, if I'm not following a stream directly, if I'm not literally handrailing a stream, I'm going to cross one every quarter mile, probably, give or take, where I live, because there's just water everywhere. So my plan is to carry an empty water filter like this Grail right here, and it's also my water bottle. So if I wanted to, what I would do is I would stop, I would drink water, I would fill up my belly as much as I can tolerate, and then I would fill this up and I'd start walking. I'd be sipping on it as I go. I don't really like water bladders just because they're pain to clean and all that stuff. So I typically like water bottles. You do you. But this is my method of collecting water. Now, along those same lines, replenishment, we talked about having food. Salty foods is going to be a big one, because if you're not replacing your electrolytes, you're going to get in trouble. You're going to start cramping up. And I know from experience, once you start cramping up, it's going to be really, really tough. I've done some long distance movements before, and once that happens, it's really tough. So high fat, high calorie, salty foods is definitely what I suggest. Stuff that you don't have to cook, stuff you don't have to heat up, you just don't have to prepare it. Even the Mountain House meals are good, because you can just put water in there and let them soak for a long time, and then they'll be edible again. You don't have to cook it. So I like the dehydrated, freeze-dried Mountain House type meals. Talked about spare clothing, because your nasty water-soaked, rain-soaked, sweat-soaked clothing is going to want to be changed out when you're sleeping, and then change back into that nasty stuff when you move out the next day. That's what I would suggest. I highly recommend a good compass like this one, because let's say it was that EMP and you can no longer use your phone GPS, you know, that we all rely upon daily. It's no longer an option. Having a good compass and knowing how to use it is a big deal. So make sure you carry something like this Suunto Global. I really like this compass. I've been trained and I know how to use it. I've practiced with it and I found it to be very, very reliable. So I highly recommend something like this. And then maps of your area. Make sure you have a way to navigate your way from A to B. Not always easy, especially when you're covering big distances. But what I've done in the past is I've just ripped out pages of the bigger atlas to the pertinent areas. I don't need a map of Arizona because I'm not in Arizona. If I was going there, then maybe, yeah, but I would have a map of Georgia, you know, and I would have some smaller maps that zoom in a little bit closer on it, the Atlanta area or whatever, on my local area. So having a map, having a compass, and knowing how to read them and knowing how to use them is a really big deal if your electronic device should fail you. I don't carry a lot of first aid stuff, but I carry the basics. I've got duct tape. I've got some electrical tape. I've got some compressed gauze right here that I can patch up cuts and wounds and boo-boos and stuff like that. And then I've also got a tourniquet here because, you know, if something really, really bad happens and I'm bleeding a lot or somebody else is bleeding a lot, I want to be able to save their life really, really quickly. So I think it's a good idea to carry these two things. And they don't weigh very much. It's not a huge, comprehensive blowout kit, but it'll solve most of the problems that I'm capable of solving. There's a lot of problems out there that you can't solve. So this is some stuff that I can actually do and help somebody or help myself perhaps. And then I've got a metal canteen cup. If something should clog this up or it should be damaged or I lose it or, you know, who knows what could happen, I have a way to make my water safe. Now let's talk about water a little bit more. If you are dying of dehydration, drink any water that you find. Don't worry about it. We can deal with the sickness hopefully later. Don't die of dehydration laying next to a puddle of water that you're just too afraid to drink because you think it's going to make you sick. If you can boil your water, you can purify it, you can make it safe in some form or fashion, please do, obviously. But that's why I carry a metal canteen cup like this one, so I can boil my water. I also have water purification tablets. I keep them in my Wazoo cash belt that I'm wearing right now. And I can make my water safe to drink if this should fail, that my primary should fail for whatever reason. And then in here, I keep some electrolyte packets to keep my body moving. And then I've just got all the other small little tidbit stuff like spare batteries, an extra lighter, some fire starter stuff, a sewing kit, just anything and everything I can think of that I should need, I like to keep in this little pouch inside of my canteen cup so it doesn't take up any extra space. Right there. Without this being full, my pack probably weighs 12 pounds, including, you know, a couple pounds of seeds here. And I can easily carry that all day long. And I know this to be a fact because I've tested myself. And I highly suggest that you do the same. Now, we could talk about this subject all day long, guys, but I really hope you have found this information that we've discussed right here to be valuable. If you do have questions, please feel free to reach out to me. You can email me at jasonleesalyer@gmail.com, Jason, JASONLEESALYER @gmail.com, or probably the easiest, and I'll get back to you the fastest, is on Instagram, and that's Jason Lee Survival, Jason Lee Survival. If you have questions, let me know, reach out to me, and I will happily respond to any and all questions. Make sure you're watching my videos at On3, that's ONTHREE on YouTube. I post videos very regular, so make sure you're checking those videos out, and I'd be really, really grateful for that.